So today I am going to teaching about our JSP. Okay. So just listen all of you. So in our second module we already covered what is a servlet. Okay. So what is the basic purpose of servlet? So why these servlets are required and how these servlets are used in our regular applications. Okay. So basically, so before going to start about this means before going to discuss about the JSP page, so let me recall the previous concept, that is servlet program. Okay. So first of all, just consider the servlet program here. This is we already covered in our second module. Okay. So basically, so what is the main purpose of this servlets program? Anybody can answer? What is the basic reason of, means what is the basic purpose of this servlets concept? That means, so here in this case, the basic purpose of this servlet is we are going to generate a response for the client request. That means what? So here basically what is the meaning of this servlet program here? So basically servlet program means it is a web application, means it is a server side web application. Okay. So basically here the servlets programs are useful for just to create any kind of web applications which are running on or any particular web server. Okay. Now let us consider how these servlets can be executed or how these servlets can be generate a response for the particular client request. Okay. So for that let us consider one example for this. Suppose this is a client. Okay. So now let us consider this is a server that is called web server. Okay. Simply consider this is a one database suppose. Okay. So here I am going to explain. So how a servlet application can generate a response for this particular client request. Okay. Now here in this case, first of all, client send a request to the web server. First of all, client send a request to the web server. Suppose let us consider client send a request to the web server. Okay. Now this web server contains, suppose here in this case there is a one servlet engine as well as one servlet application. Here in this case, in this web server, so there is two types, means there is two things are there. The first one is servlet engine and the second one is servlet application. Okay. Now whenever a client send a request to the web server, okay, so now the web server simply recognize the client request, the same thing forwarded to the servlet application. Okay. Now the servlet application is, now the servlet engine means once the web server send a request to the forwarded the request to that servlet application, now the servlet engine means a servlet container generate the response for the particular content. Okay. So now the same response will be transferred to this sign, means for this client requests. Suppose there is no database, if there is any database, simply it is send the request and it will get the response from this database to the client. So this is the basic interaction between client and server, that is why using a servlet application. All of you clear this one? So here in this case, so how this servlet application means, how this servlet application generate a response for the particular client request means what? Here first of all, a client send a request to the web server. Okay. So once the client means once the web server receives the client request, that client request simply forwarded to the servlet. Okay. Now the servlet engine or the servlet container translates, means the container simply executes the servlet program and simply generate the response for the particular client. So this is the general process in our servlet program. Okay. So now let us consider a simple example for this interaction here. Suppose let us consider this is a client. Okay. Now this is, suppose let us consider this is a one hello.html. Okay. So now let us consider this is a client side application. So in this client side, what is the name of this client side application? That is hello.html. That means now let us consider that this is a one form. Suppose this is a one form and there are two attributes. Suppose this is for name and suppose this is for password and this is submit. Okay. So now here in this case there is a hello.html. In this we are trying to send the information from clients to the server application. That means now here in this case name and password, and we simply click on this submit button. Okay. So whenever we are just simply enter the submit button, means enter these values. After that we just click on the submit button. Okay. So now, so once you just click on the submit button, that indicates we are sending a request from the client to the server. That indicates we are simply sending a request to the server. Okay. So once the server means once we are sending a request from client to the server, now the server application means the server application executes the servlet application and generate the response for this particular client request, and the particular response will be displayed on a web browser. Okay, so this is the general process. Okay, now we are talking about the servlet application. Okay, so for this, so in order to generate the response of the particular client request using servlet application, so what is the actual process here? That actual process is, first of all, we have to generate, means we have to create a hello.html. That means that HTML is called one form. That form is submit button. Okay, means it contains the following fields. One is name, password, and submit. Okay, so once we are just click on the submit button, and it will send a request to the web server. So once it is transmitted, means once it is received by the web server, so now the servlet program executed by the container, means run by the web server. Okay, after that the servlet program can generate the response for this particular client. That means, so here in this case, what is the concept here? That means, so in order to generate the response for the particular client request, we are required two things. The first one is front-end application, the second one is called a back-end application. Okay, now this front-end application we call a presentation logic, and the back-end application we call a business logic. That means the back-end application means what? Now here in this case, this is a servlet program. Okay, so now here in this case it is called a presentation logic, and this one is called a business logic. That means, so here in this case, whenever we are going to compare these two, means here JSP and servlets. Okay, so first of all here in this case, what is the main functionalities of the servlets? So these are the various functionalities of servlets. Okay, now the basic thing is here, so whenever we are writing a servlet application to generate any particular response to the particular client request, okay, so in that case, always that servlet application is always separates the business logic from the presentation logic. All of you clear this one? Say yes or no. So here in this case, presentation logic means what? It is simply a front-end application, and the business logic means it is simply a back-end application. So the presentation logic means it is called HTML page, and the business logic means it may be a servlet program or it may be a JSP program. Okay, so this is the actual process in our servlet concepts. Okay, now let us come to this JSP program here. Okay, so first of all we are talking about, means we will discuss about what are the similarities between this JSP as well as servlets. Okay, so basically here the JSP and servlets, these two are web-based servers, means server-side web-based applications. Basically these two applications are useful for just to generate the dynamic content for a particular client request. So these are the two similarities between this JSP and servlets. Okay, now what are the differences between these two? So here in this case the first difference is, whereas in servlet always the business logic is separated from this presentation logic. That means, so whereas in servlet program, that means that program is completely in terms of Java code. That programming code is completely in terms of is simply Java code. But whereas in JSP, here the JSP code means it is a combination of both static HTML code as well as plus and means Java code. That means what? So here in this case, in our JSP program, we are writing some JSP tags, HTML tags, as well as we are writing some Java code. So inside this Java code, we are simply writing all these HTML tags as well as these JSP tags. That means what? So in our JSP code, both presentation logic and this business logic, these two are tightly coupled. Here in this case, both the business logic and presentation logic, these two are tightly coupled. Tightly coupled means, so in this case, so both these means here in this case, the business logic and presentation logic, these two are combinedly working. Means together we are placed in a single program, and these two are combinedly working to generate the response. All of you clear this one? Say yes or no. So that is the basic difference between JSP and this servlet. All of you clear this one? Okay. So now tell me, what is the servlet here? What is the servlet basically? What is the servlet? It is a server-side web-based application. Second one is, it is useful for just to generate the dynamic content for a client request. So here how a servlet can generate the response here? Client request. How? That means simply a client send a request to the web server. Now the web server simply recognizes the client request, and the same thing forward to the servlet engine, servlet program. Now the servlet engine is compile the program, execute the program, and generate the response for the particular client request. Okay? So this is about servlets, how the servlets can generate the response for the particular client request. Whereas now the next concept is, so how a JSP can generate the response for a particular client request. Okay, so here in this case, so remember one more point here. So in JSP, whenever we are writing a JSP program, means writing a JSP program means that indirectly indicates we are writing a servlet program. All of you clear this point? So here in this case, writing a JSP program means that indicates indirectly we are writing a servlet program. So how it is, we will see in our JSP architecture. All of you clear this one? So simply remember here, so basically JSP means it is a web server, means server-side web-based application. Okay, so in our JSP program, always we are writing JSP tags as well as HTML tags within, means inside a Java program. Whereas in Java servlet, whereas in servlets, we are writing business logic separate and the presentation logic is separate. So the presentation logic means simply it is a HTML form, and business logic means it's simply a Java code. Okay, so this is about JSP and servlets. Okay, so the next one is JSP architecture. Basically here, JSP architecture is, there are two phases in this JSP architecture. The first phase is, that is translation phase, and second one is request processing phase. Okay, so here in this case, so in JSP architecture there are two phases. The first one is translation phase, second one is request processing phase. Okay, now so let us consider a simple example for this concept. So this is a client, this one is a web server. Okay, so now here in this is a JSP container. Okay, so inside this JSP and servlet engine. Okay, now let us consider a simple web page here. Suppose this is hello.jsp and this one is suppose hello servlet.java and this one is hello servlet.class file. Okay, okay. So just listen here. So in our JSP architecture, okay, so here there is a client and this one is web server, and here there are some applications are there. Okay, so first of all, now here in this case, first of all, client send a request to this web server. Client send a request to the web server. Okay, so that is the first one, that is client send a request to the web server. Okay, so once the client send a request, means send a request to the web server. Okay, now the web server simply recognize the request. Here once the web server receives the request, so simply it recognizes the request. Okay, the same thing is forwarded to this JSP page. Okay, so here in this case, once the web server is recognized the request from this client side, the same thing is forwarded to this JSP page. Now the JSP page reads the request. Okay, then after that, so that means here in this case it is read. Okay, so once the JSP page reads the request from this web server, okay, now the JSP container is calls this JSP method. Okay, after that it translates the JSP page into a servlet code. All of you clear this one? Simply here just listen. Here in this case, first of all, client send a request. Okay, so after that web server simply recognizes the request. Okay, then the same request forwarded to the JSP page. Okay, then after that JSP page reads the request. Okay, then after that a JSP container calls this, means a JSP container is simply converts this JSP page into a servlet code. Okay, that means that is called third step, this one. That is generate. Okay, that means what? So here in this case, so a JSP page is converted into the servlet code. That is called a translation phase. That is our first phase. That means what? So basically here JSP architecture, there are two phases. So what, now tell me what is the meaning of this translation phase here? So the translation phase means, so in this case, a JSP container is simply converts a JSP code into a servlet code. So now here in this case, this process is called a translation phase. That is phase 1. That means translation phase. So the translation phase means what? So here in this case, simply a JSP container converts the JSP code into a servlet code. Okay, so that is about this phase 1. So once it is generated, okay, so once it is generated this servlet code, now the servlet code must be compiled and must be executed. Okay, now, so once the JSP container generates this servlet code, okay, now the servlet engine calls the servlet code, okay, and compile the servlet code. That is the fourth step. That is this one. That is fourth one. So here in this case, compile. All of it clear here? So that means what? So in this case, in this phase 1, so here a servlet code is, means a JSP code is simply converts into a servlet code. Okay, that is done by this JSP container or JSP engine. Okay, so during this phase, a JSP engine or a JSP container simply converts the JSP code into a servlet code. Okay, so that is about this phase. That is phase 1. Now phase 2, in this phase 2, a servlet engine simply calls this translated JSP source code. That means that is called is servlet source code. Okay, now simply the JSP means here the servlet engine calls this, generate this servlet class, okay, simply it compiles. So after that it simply execute that code. Because, so here in this case, first of all the JSP converts into the servlet program, okay, so in order to generate the response for this client request, okay, now the client request means here in this case, that servlet application must be compiled as well as must be executed. Okay, so that is done at this second phase. Okay, that means what? So during this phase, that means it is called phase 2. Okay, so at this phase 2, okay, simply a servlet code is simply compiled, okay, so after that is simply executed. That means what? So in this case, in this phase 2, a servlet engine is compile the servlet code as well as execute the servlet code. Okay, so that means here now it is the fourth step, and after that it is simply execute this one. Okay, this is about fifth one. All of you clear this one? Simply remember here, phase 1. What is the meaning of this phase 1 here? At this phase, simply a JSP container converts a JSP code into a servlet code. At second phase, now the JSP means the source code, means the servlet source code again compiled, and that compiled code must be executed. That is done by this servlet engine. So after that, the same thing is that the same executable code is generated by this web server. Okay, now this web server simply calls the doc class file and simply generate the response for this particular client request. So that is called last one, that is response. All of you clear this one? Okay, so that means what? So actually we are writing a JSP page, okay, but the JSP page is simply converts to the servlet code. Okay, now this servlet code generates the response. So that's why I am telling that. So here in this case, so writing a JSP program means indirectly we are writing a servlet program. All of you clear this one? So here in this case, so the main intention of this concept is, so how to generate the response. How to generate the response for a particular client request using a JSP program. All of you understood this one? Say yes or no? Okay, now tell me what are the difference between JSP and servlet, and how a servlet means how a JSP can generate the response. Anyone can answer me? Yes.
Business logic and presentation logic are combined, but
Yes.
in JSP both are separated.
Yes.
Whenever we write the hello.jsp, it is converted into servlet code and then again compiled, and that compiled program gives the output.
That means, so here in this case, a servlet means in that case, so presentation and business logic both are means tightly coupled. Okay, that means, so what is the drawback in that? If it is tightly coupled, then what is the drawback? That will reflect it to the page, means that is front-end application. So that is one of the drawback. And another one is, any other one? That means, so in servlet program, we are basically writing the HTML code inside the program. That means we are writing the HTML code in a println statement. Have you remembered that one? In your servlet program? That means what? So that increase the code complexity. Okay, so that is the one of the drawback. And any other things? So now tell me what are the drawbacks in servlet?
in subnet program we have to define a different one business logic and presentation logic separately, and where the JSP program we have to combine that HTML code and Java code
Inside the Java code.
combine
Okay.
combine, and this JSP program is much better than the subnet because of this combination part of the HTML code and Java code.
Okay. Any other things? Okay. So all of you clear this one? Okay. So simply remember. So what are the drawbacks in servlet makes? Simply here in this case there is no presentation logic in separate way. Means here in our servlet program both are simply tightly coupled. Because of this case, so the code complexity is increased. And whenever you are making some changes in the servlet program, that is simply reflected on that front end application. Or if you want to make any changes on front end application, that will reflect on the server side application. So that is the drawback in our servlet program. So how we will overcome that one? That is by keeping all the codes inside a Java program. That is by making this JSP tags as well as HTML tags by using Java code. That is in this JSP case. All of you clear this one? Okay. So here we are going to discussing about some Java programming basic concepts. Okay. So first of all, before going to discussing about this Java programming, okay. So first of all, we should know about what is the C programming language. You already implemented so many applications using C programming, okay. Now we will see what are the drawbacks in C programming in generally. Okay, that means, so in earlier days, all the programs are implemented by using C programming. That means like system applications, any internet applications, any complex applications like that, okay. But nowadays, why the developers are only prefer this Java programming rather than this C programming language? All of you clear this one? Here in this case, so before going to discussing about what is this Java programming, okay. So first of all, we have to discuss, we have to understand about, we have some idea about this, what is C programming and what are the drawbacks in C programming. Okay, now let us consider here the C programming. Okay, so C programming is what? Here it is simply a procedural programming language. Okay, so here in this case, now let us consider, suppose using this C programming, we are writing a simple application. Suppose let us consider this is called an application. Suppose here in this case, this is one application. This is implemented by using C programming. Suppose let us consider this application may be some banking application. Just assume. Okay. So here in this case, here I am going to discussing about, so what are the differences? Means here in this case, so in earlier days most of the developers are used this C programming language, but nowadays why the people are preferred only this Java programming rather than this C programming? I just want to clarify that one. All of you clear this one? Okay. So here in this case, now let us consider we are going to implement a banking application using this C programming language. Okay. So here in this case, in basic terms, all of you just remember, basically we are writing a program for what purpose? Basically we are writing a program for what purpose? Just to process the data. That means what? For any kind of program, there are, means for any program, any kind of program, the program is always contains two parts. One is code, another one is data. That means what? So any program contains, that is the combination of code plus data. So why we are writing a program means what? So in order to process this data, we are writing this code. All of you clear this one? So basically what is the program means what? It is set of instructions. That set of instructions are useful for just to process this data. Okay, so basically program means what? It is a combination of both code and data. That means, so for any kind of application, data is a crucial part. For any kind of application, data is a crucial part in our programming. Okay, now using this statement, now let us consider this is a banking application. Okay, so in this banking application, we are writing one C programming just to process the banking application data, means banking data. Okay, so here in this case, banking data means it's obviously it's a crucial data. Okay, so when we are writing, means whenever we are writing the application for that banking information, so we have to provide the security for their banking data. Is it clear or not? Say yes or no? So here in this case, so we are writing an application. We are writing on application means we are going to implement an application for a banking data. Okay, so here in this case, banking data means it is a crucial part, means it is a crucial data. Okay, so we have to take care about security part for this crucial data, for this banking data in our application. Okay, now whenever we are writing an application for this banking application, okay, so in that case, suppose let us consider this is a banking application. Okay, so for so means in order to implement this banking application, let us consider we are writing one application. Suppose we are writing one, so let us consider this is a banking application, banking data. Okay, so for this banking data we are now writing one C programming. Let us consider this is a C program. Okay, so now let us consider, suppose in this C programming we are writing, suppose 1 to 100 functions are there for this application, just assume. Okay, so this is a banking data, so this is a C programming. So in this C programming we are writing 100 functions are there. Okay, now each and every function perform its own task. Okay, because here in this case C programming means what? It is a procedural language. Means here in this case, so all the data means all the instructions can be divided into various blocks, and each block we called a function, and each function perform its own task. Okay, now let us consider suppose function 1, function 2, function 3 like this, function hundreds. Okay, now let us consider suppose here the function 1 suppose having some data related to suppose some accounts. Suppose function 2 having some data related to some transactions. Similarly function 3 like that, some other data about that related to this bank. Okay, now here in this case suppose we are writing function 1 and function 2 like this, function 100. Okay, so whenever we are writing a information, means whenever we are writing these functions for this banking application in our C programming language, okay, here in this case always the function 1 information is always available to the next 99 functions of that same program. All of you clear this one? Say yes or no? Here in this case, so for our banking application basically the data is a crucial part. Okay, but here in this case for this banking data we are writing a C application. Okay, so in these C applications we are writing suppose 100 functions. Okay, now whenever we are writing the number of functions in the C programming, now one function information is available to the next function. That means what? So here in this case, so there is no security for this function 1 data, and there is no security for this function 2 data. Similarly there is no security for this function 3 data like 100 functions. That means a function 100 information means a function, here function 100 can interact, means can retrieve the information from the function 1. Similarly function 2 also can retrieve the any function information. That means what? So we can simply say that here, so whenever we are writing, means whenever we are going to implement a complex applications using C programming, so we cannot provide security for that particular data in our C programming. All of you clear this one? Say yes or no? So now tell me what is the basic drawback in C programming? That is there is no security for our data in our C programming. So because of this reason, always nowadays the developers have preferred this Java programming rather than this C programming. Now the next concept is, so how a Java program can provide security for our data? That is by how, means here the next question is what? So how this Java program can achieve this problem? That means what? So that is here in this case a Java programming can achieve the, means it provides a solution that is by following various OOPS principles. All of you clear here? That means that is called object oriented programming. That means, so here in this case, so basic drawback is in C programming is there is no security for the data. Now the second one, next case is, so how the Java programming can provide the security for our data means that is by using this object oriented programming concept. That means, so what do you mean with this object oriented programming here? Object oriented programming means, so here in this case everything acts as an object. Okay, that means what? So basically here Java programming is called an object oriented programming language. That indicates, so all the means each and every statement of the program or each and every component of the program is act as an object. So that's why here it is called an object oriented programming language. Okay, so here in this case a Java program can provide security for their data within that program, that is by following various object oriented programming principles or concepts. All of you clear this one? Say yes or no? Okay, so now tell me what are the basic difference in these two cases? Yes, yes.
But it depends on object.
Java is not pure object oriented, it's a true object oriented. Do you know that question?
Yes.
Anyone can answer this question? So Java is a pure object oriented programming or true object oriented programming? Java is a pure or true?
Yes.
Java is a pure object oriented programming or true object oriented programming? I already asked the same question number of times in the classes, in our classes. Why it is not pure? Why it is not pure? Why it is true? So basically Java programming is a true object oriented programming language. Okay, so in our object oriented programming languages, so there is only one language, pure object, that is called a small talk. So Smalltalk programming language is only one language, that is pure object-oriented programming language. Okay, like a C++, Java, .NET, these things are comes under this true object-oriented programming language. Okay, so that means here in our Java programming, it is a true object-oriented programming only. It's not pure object-oriented programming. Okay, so here in this case now, so what do you mean by this object-oriented programming here? So the object-oriented programming means, so in our Java programming, all the components or all the elements or all the statements act as a object. Okay, so because of this object or because of this object-oriented principles only, here the Java can provide security for our data in our Java program. Okay, now the next one is, so what are the object-oriented programming features? Okay, I am just writing here only major features of this object-oriented programming. Okay, we are having number of features. Okay, so I am just list out here some of the major features of this object-oriented programming concepts. Okay, so basically the following are object-oriented programming features. The first one is interpreted, second one is platform independent, third one is robust, next one is inheritance, next one is secure, next last one is multi-threading, means multi-threading here. Okay, so first of all here, so basically Java is also called interpreted programming language. Java is also called interpreted programming language. So what do you mean by this interpreted here? Suppose let us consider C programming. Let us consider C programming. Okay, so once we are writing the C programming, okay, so how we will get the output for the C programming? How we will generate the output for C programming? Means first of all we have to compile the program. Okay, so first of all we have to compile the program, then only we will get the output for that particular program. That means what? So simply here in this case we have simply compiled the program. Okay, so once the compilation process is successful, then that C programming code is simply converts into the machine understandable code. Okay, so that's why here in this case C simply is called a compiled language. Okay, but here in this case Java programming is called compiled and interpreted language. Why? Because, so let us consider here, suppose this is a Java program, just assume. Okay, so in this Java program, okay, so how we will generate the response, means how we will generate the output for this Java program. That means what? First of all we have to compile the program. Okay, so during this compilation process, a Java code, means here a Java code is converted into means here in this case simply here during this compilation process here in this case simply this Java code is converted into some source code or compiled. Okay, so during this compilation process, so simply this high level language instructions are converted into that is some source code instructions. Okay, so after that, now in this case these source code instructions are not at all understood by the computer machine. This source code is not at all understood by that compiler, means that computer machine. Now again these source code instructions must be converted into that machine understandable code. All of you clear this one? If it is in our C programming, what happened? Simply compile. Once it is success, then we will get the output. Why? Because so once the C programming is compiled, that indicates that C programming instructions are converted into that machine understandable instructions. So now that machine can easily understand that instructions and it can easily generate the output for the particular program. Okay, but whereas in Java programming what happened? It is called a compiled and interpreted. Compiled means what? So during the compilation process, a high level language code converts into the source code. Okay, now the source code is also not understood by that machine. Its source code is also not understood by that machine. Now the source code must be converted into the machine understandable code. So in that case, so how this source code will convert into the machine understandable code? So that phase we call an interpretation. That means what? So during the compilation process, is simply a Java code, means a Java instructions are converted into the some source code instructions. Okay, now the source code instructions must be converted into the machine understandable code. That machine understandable code we call, that is a byte code. That means what? So here in this case it is a compile, and second one is it is called interpreter. So in this phase simply the source code is converted into this byte code. All of you clear this one? Okay, now this byte code is simply understood by this JVM, that is Java Virtual Machine. Okay, that means what JVM means, that is called a Java runtime environment. Okay, it provides Java runtime environment for this Java applications. So here in this case, during the compilation process, it simply converts the Java code into the source code, and during the interpretation process, it simply converts this source code into this byte code. Now this byte code can understood by the machine, okay, and the byte code can easily understood by the computer, and it will generate the output for this particular program. So that's why here in this case it is called compiled and interpreted programming language. That means what? Basically while we are compiling the Java program, we are writing suppose Java C. So what is the meaning of this C here? That is called compiler. So once it is compiled, then after that we are writing suppose Java and program file name .java. Okay, that means what? Now it is called an interpreter. All of it clear here? Say yes or no? So that's why here it is called a Java means it is called an interpreted programming language. So the interpreted programming language means what? Simply a Java source code is converted into the byte code. Okay, so in that case, first of all it must be compiled. So after that, after compilation, that must be interpreted. So interpreted means what? Now the Java source code again converted into this byte code. So the byte code is now easily understood by the Java virtual machine. Now it can generate the output for the particular Java program. So that's why it is called interpreted programming language. All of you clear this one? Say yes or no? Okay. So the next one is platform independent. So what do you mean by platform here? Platform means it is an operating system. Okay. So here in this case, so the platform independent means, that means here in this case, let us consider what do you mean means here in this case. So what do you mean by this platform independent means? Let us consider a simple example suppose. Okay. Now let us consider we are writing suppose an application on some other OS. Suppose like consider suppose some Windows or XP, suppose some Windows, okay, operating system. Okay. So now we are writing an application on this particular OS. Okay. Now after compile this code, okay, we have generated suppose some .class file. That means what? Once we have convert this source code into this byte code means that is called a .class file here. Okay, now the .class file, we are executing the program in, means we are running the program in another system, operating system, and once it is generate the response, means once it is generates the .class file, now the .class file can execute any other operating system. So that is called a platform independent. That means, so we can write the program once and we can run anywhere. That is called write once, run anywhere. That means what? So here it is called write once, run anywhere. That means what? So we can write the program in any operating system, okay? So we can compile the program and we can execute the .class file in any other operating system. So that's why here it is called a platform independent. Okay, all of you clear this one? Okay, so platform means what? It is a simply operating system. So basically here in this case, Java programs are always platform independent. So what do you mean by this platform independent here? So we can write the application in another operating system and we can execute the program in any other operating system. That means we call that is write once, run anywhere. All of you clear this one? Okay, so that is about this platform independent. Next one is robust. So what do you mean by this robust here? So here in this case, Java programming is also called robust programming language. Robust means because in our C programming language, how to handle the errors? In our C programming, how to handle error? How to handle error? In our C programming, how to handle error? That means basically how to means how in this C programming, how an error can generate here? How the errors are generated in C programming during the compilation process. During the compilation process, we will get some errors. So now tell me how that errors can generated during that process. In our C programming, while you are compiling any C programming, okay, are you getting any error in general way? Getting or not? Okay, so how that error can be generated? Basically, what do you mean by error? That means, suppose let us consider in our C programming language, so once we are writing a simple C programming, and after that we are simply compile. Okay, so whenever we are going to compile the program, in that case, during the compilation process, it will generate some errors. Why that compilation process can generate the error? Because Because so whenever we are writing some application, that means whenever we are implement some C programming, we are writing some instructions. That means so all the instructions must be follows or must be followed by the C standards. That means C library. If any instruction is not matching with the C library standard, then obviously simply the compiler will generate the error. Suppose here we are writing one application. In this application, suppose at 10th line, you are mismatching the contents. Suppose instead of that printout, means suppose printf statement, you are writing some other statements. Instead of that printf statement, you are writing some other statement. So while you are compiling the program, it's obviously generate the error for the particular line. Why? Because that printf statement means if you are, suppose you are writing scanf or you are writing suppose system.out.println instead of that printf. So once we are writing system.out.println instead of the printf statement, obviously that compilation process generates one error. Why? Because that system.out.println is not matching with that C library. Okay, so that's why here the compiler generate the error. Okay, so here in this case in our C programming, whenever errors are generated, so that can be handled by programmers only. Means we can handle the errors, means during the compilation process we will go to the error and we will find the error and we can modify that instruction and again we will compile and we will solve ourselves only. Okay, but in our Java programming what happened? In Java programming, so here in this case we call exception. In Java program we call error is called exception. So exception means what? It's simply abnormal condition. So abnormal condition means what? So simply here exception means it's a runtime error. So do you know what do you mean by compile time error and runtime error? Compile time error means what? So during the compilation process, if the compiler generates any errors, that is called compiler. That means what? So during the compilation process, if any of the instruction is not matching with the C library or Java library, then in that case it will generate the error. That error is called a compiler error. Runtime error means what? Suppose in our C programming, the program is executed but your output is not getting, means you are not getting output. Why? Because suppose in our C programming you are writing suppose some array size. Okay, suppose actually array size is suppose 5. Actual array size is suppose 5. But you are trying to enter 10 entries for that particular array. So in that case what happened? It will obviously generate an error. That is called a runtime error. That means what? So program is executed but you will not get the output. Why? Because of this runtime error. So the runtime error means what? So during the interpretation process, if any of your instruction is not follows that operating system standards, then in that case it will generate an error. That error is called an interpretation error or runtime error. Okay, so here in this case, so that runtime error we call in Java, that is called exception. So basically exception means what? It's simply abnormal condition. Okay, so here in our Java programming, so we can handle this exception. Except means we can handle these exceptions, that is means in our Java program we can automatically handle these exceptions, that is by using exception handling concept in our Java programming. So because of this only we call this one as robust programming. So why we are calling this Java programming as a robust means because of excellent exception handling concept in our Java program. That means what? So we can automatically allow, means we can automatically remove our exceptions in our Java program using exception handling. So because of this reason we call it is a robust programming language. All of you clear this one? Say yes or no? Okay, next one is inheritance. So this is also one of the important feature. So what do you mean by this inheritance here? Means here in this case inheritance means what? So basically in our Java programming there is one of the important feature, that is reusability of a code. Reusability of a code is one of the most important feature of a Java programming. So what do you mean by this reusability of a code? That means so we can use the same code for the number of times in our program without redefine the same code in our program. That means suppose let us consider in our program, just consider, this is just I am writing. There is suppose class A and similarly suppose there is class B and class C like this. Okay, now suppose the class B wants to use all the properties of this class A. Okay, here in this case the class B wants to get all the properties of this class A without redefining the class A into this class B. Okay, so that is called inheritance, that is called reusability of the code. So how you will achieve this reusability of a code in a Java program is, that is by using inheritance concepts. All of you clear this one? Say yes or no? So here in this case in our Java programming, reusability of a code is the most important feature in our Java programming code language. That means how you will achieve this reusability of a code means that is by using inheritance concept. So what do you mean by this inheritance here? Inheritance means it is the process of acquiring the properties from one class to the another class. Suppose here in this case the class B wants to acquire the properties from the class A. Okay. Now this class A is called superclass, that is subclass. All of you clear this one? That means what? In our normal life, suppose general life you are taking suppose parents and children's. Okay, parents and children's. That means what? Now it is also called one hierarchy. That means what? So all the parents properties are belongs to children's. That means what? So here in this case the children's are directly getting the properties without redefining the parents properties in their properties. All of you clear this one? Say yes or no? That means what? So here in this case we are going to maintain some hierarchy without redefining the same code for number of times in our program. That means what? So here in this case reusability of a code means we can use the same code for number of times without redefining in our program. So how we will achieve that one means that is by using inheritance concept. So here in this case, so in our Java programming we can achieve the reusability of a code by using inheritance concept. So what do you mean by this inheritance here? So inheritance means it is simply a process of extracting or acquiring the properties from one class to the another class. Okay, so that is about this inheritance concept. So next one is secure. Okay, so what do you mean by this secure here? So how the Java program is secured? Because of this OOPS principles. Because of OOPS principles. So what are the OOPS principles are there? That is first one is class, second one is object, next one is polymorphism, abstraction, encapsulation and inheritance. So because of this reason here the Java program is always secured. All of it clear? Okay, so here in this case, so how can we say that yes, Java program is secure means because of this object-oriented programming concepts. Okay, because here in this object-oriented programming concepts, there are two things. One is class and object. So basically, class and object, these two are basic building blocks for our Java programming. Okay, so because of this object and class, always our Java program is always completely secured from one class to the another class. Means we can restrict the information from one class to the another class. So by this way we can provide security for our data. That is by using simply object-oriented programming concepts. Okay, next one is multi-threading. Multi-threading means what? Multi-threading means we can execute number of processes, number of threads parallelly. That is called multi-threading. So the brief discussion we will have in the next further classes, that's why. Okay, so this is about some of the major features. All of you clear this one? Yes. Okay, now tell me why this object-oriented programming is called interpreted programming language? Why it is called interpreted programming language? Because Java program must be compiled and must be interpreted. So during the compilation process, the Java source code is the Java high level code instructions simply convert into the source code instructions. Okay. Now the source code instructions are also not understood by the JVM, means current machine. Okay. So that's why, so again the source code must be converted into the machine understandable language, means that is zeros and ones. Okay. That's why here in this case, so first phase, at the first phase what, that is compilation phase, simply the Java instructions are converted into the source code, and second phase, that is called during the interpretation phase, the simple source code is converted into the bytecode. Now that bytecode we call .class file. All of you clear this one? Okay. Next one is why it is called robust programming language? Because here in this case it can provide excellent exception handling mechanism to handle the exceptions in our program, in our Java program. Okay. Next, here in this case, so how a Java program can secure, means how we will provide secure for our data in our Java programming? That is by using object-oriented programming principles or concepts. Okay, so this is about some of the object-oriented features. Okay, clear? Okay, so the following concepts are called object-oriented programming concepts. The first one is class, object, abstraction, encapsulation, next inheritance. Okay, last one is polymorphism. Okay, so these are called object-oriented programming concepts or features, means principles. Okay, so first of all let me explain this class and objects. Okay, so first of all, what is a class here? What is a class in our Java programming language? Okay, Suppose let us consider a simple application. Suppose some application here, Java application. Okay. This is some data. Suppose the data belongs to suppose some students. So for this data we are writing suppose one application. Okay. So now let us consider there is a student data. Okay. So for this student data we are going to write one application, that is by using Java programming. Okay. So now here in this case, in order to write this application using this Java programming, okay. So first of all we have to define the students data in our program. So where we have to define the student data, that is in this class. Okay. So first of all here in this case, first of all, so what is a class, and after that what is the object? That means what? So here in this, let us consider in this application, so in order to implement this application for this following student data, so we have to keep all this data within a class. So the question is here, so why we will write all these things within the class, and why we are creating an object for this class? Okay, so first of all here in this case, so let us consider suppose this our campus structure, okay, our campus building structure. Okay, so now let us consider before the construction of this building there is one blueprint given by some architecture. Just assume, okay. So before this building construction, so there is one architecture, okay. So now that architecture is called one blueprint, okay. Now this building is called one object. That means what? Now in this case, so this object means this building is always designed or constructed by following this blueprint. Okay. Now in terms of Java programming, this blueprint is called a Java class, and this object is called, means this building is called an object. That means what? So here in this case a blueprint means it's a completely conceptual basis, whereas the object means, whereas the building means it's completely physical structure. All of you clear this one? That means what? So here in this case, so the class and object, so these two are, means here the blueprint and designing structure of this designing, these two are two building blocks for this building structure. So in terms of Java, similarly here the class and object also, these two are two building blocks for our Java programming. All of you clear this one? Say yes or no? So for this building, suppose for our campus building there is a blueprint, okay. That blueprint we call, in terms of Java program, that blueprint we call class, and this building we call objects. That means what? So here in this case always we are designing this object, that is by following this class, or means by this blueprint. That means what now? So that's why here in this case both the class and object, these two are called basic building blocks of the Java programming. Okay. So basically the class is called a blueprint of an object. Class is called a blueprint of an object. So which means here in this case, within this class we can define all the class members. Means suppose for what data we are going to write this Java programming, that entire data we have to mention within this class. That means what? Now the class contains some class members. Class members means what? So the declaring means the variable declaration as well as that method definition. That means what? So basically the class contains class members. So what do you mean by these class members here? Class members means, so it is the combination of variable declaration as well as method definition. Okay, that means what? Now in this case let us consider suppose for this student data, okay. So we are going to write one application, okay. Now let us consider we are creating one class, suppose class students. That means here in this case class is a keyword, class, okay. So student means here the student name is followed by a keyword, class keyword, okay. So remember always the first letter of this class is always uppercase letter, okay, here in this case. So how we will write the class for the following data means, first of all the class name is always followed by a class keyword, okay. So here the class name must be starts with the uppercase letter, okay. Then after that this class A contains some class members. This class A contains some class members. The class members means what? Suppose I am writing here, suppose string name. So that is, this is called one variable declaration. Similarly, if there is a one method, suppose let us consider public void name. That means that is called one method, means method definition, okay. Now the combination of these two we call a class member. Okay, that means what? So basically here in this case, so what is the purpose of this class here? Basically a class means it is a blueprint of an object, okay. So within this class we can declare all the variables as well as we can declare various methods definitions in this class. Okay, now in this the next one is, suppose once we are just defining all the class members within this class, okay. So in this case, here in this case we want to provide the security for our class data. We want to provide the security for our class data. So how we will provide security for our data? That is by creating an object. That is by creating an object. That means what? So here in this case, so once we are defining data in this class, okay, so now we want to restrict this class data only for this particular data. If any class data means if any other class wants to retrieve this data from this class, the class must be take permission from this class. All of you clear this one? Suppose let us consider there are two classes, okay. So in this class we are defining some data, okay, but this class don't want to give this information, means don't want to give her information to any other class. That means what? So this class only can retrieve the information from this class with the permission, with the proper permission. That proper permission in terms of our Java language we call an object. All of you clear this one? That means now here in this case we are creating on a class, okay. So within this class we are defining various class members, okay. So here in this case we want to provide security for our class members. So how we will provide security for our class members means that is by creating an object. Okay, so why we are creating an object means what here? Because here in this case, so what is the meaning of this creating an object means? So whenever we are creating an object for this class, okay, so in that case, that creating an object means that object will gives the dynamic memory allocations for these class members. All of you clear this one? Say yes or no? Yes, so here in this case, first of all, we are defining a class, okay. Now we want to protect, means we want to provide security for this class data. So how we will provide security for this data? That is by creating this object. Okay, now once we are just creating an object, now what is the purpose of this creating an object? So once we are creating an object for any kind of class, that indicates that object allows or that object provides dynamic memory allocations for that particular class members. All of you clear? So because of this reason only we are just simply creating an object for this class. And second one is, so what is the purpose of this object creation here? Second one is we can simply restrict the class data from one class to the another class. So because of these two reasons we are creating an object for the particular class. All of you clear? Say yes or no? Okay, so here in this case, so we are defining a simply class, okay. So after that we want to provide the security for this class data, okay. So for that we have to create an object. So now tell me what is an object here? So object means it's simply an instance of a class. Object means what? It is simply an instance of a class or copy of a class. Okay, so how to create an object means what? That is by using new operator. How to create an object means what? That is by using new operator. Suppose let us consider the same class here. I am writing class A and just consider there is some class members here, okay. Now how you will create an object for this class A here? That is by using A class type, okay. Next one is object reference type, that is this name can be any name, you can give any name, okay. Then after that using this new operator and class A, okay. Now this is called object creation. All of you clear? So here in this case A is called class type, this A is called object reference type, and this one is called simply, this entire thing is called simply object, okay. Now using this object we can access any kind of variable as well as we can access any kind of constructor as well as we can access any kind of instance variables of a class. All of you clear this one? That means, so once we are creating a class for this particular class A, okay, that indicates now this entire information of this class is simply binded into this object. All of you clear? That means now entire information of this class is simply packed into this object. Okay, now this means whenever any other class wants to acquire, means wants to retrieve this information or wants to get the properties from this class A, that class only get the properties through this object reference of this class A. All of you clear this one? Say yes or no? So that is the importance of this class and object. Okay, so here in this case, so the class and object, these two are two basic building blocks of Java programming. Okay, so basically class is useful for just to defining various class members in our Java programming. Okay, and second one is, so here in this case, once we are defining all the class members in our Java programming, okay, so we have to provide security for our data. So how we will provide security for our class members in our programming? That is by creating an object. So what do you mean by this object here? So object means it is an instance of a class, okay. So here in this case, how to create an object means that is by using new operator. And second one is, so why we creating an object means because of these two reasons. What are the two reasons here? What are the two reasons? Means here in this case the object creation is always provides dynamic memory allocations for the particular class members, and second one is it can provide security for our, means it can restrict the class data within for the particular class only. Okay, so this is about class and objects. Okay, any queries for this? All of you clear this one? Okay. Okay, thank you.